Good morning. My name is Chip Henderson. I'm one of the Sunday school teachers at the church, and today I'm going to tell you about some of the prophets of the Old Testament. Two in particular, Elijah and Elisha. One, Elijah, came first, and his protege or his helper throughout much of his ministry was Elisha. Today the story we're going to be talking about was when Elisha's ministry ended on this earth and he was taken up to heaven. I'm with you today in my kitchen on the 40-acre woods where we live north of Durham. I'm wearing a robe that was given to my grandfather from a gentleman in Africa. And so in the Old Testament and throughout the New Testament, many of the men would have worn these robes. They didn't have blue jeans and dockers and t-shirts, but robes would keep them cool, especially with them working outdoors and the way they would travel. I also have a cloak on me that will represent a part of the story today that we'll talk about when Elijah is taken up to heaven. So first, as they were walking, much of the travel in the Old Testament was not by car, by train, or by airplane. They did not exist. So throughout the Old Testament and even into the New Testament, much of the travel by people in the Bible was by walking. And so today we're going to hear a story of Elijah walking great distances with his protege Elisha and how he was ultimately taken up into heaven. They sometimes might travel by donkey, sometimes by colt, and occasionally, if they were very wealthy, they might even have a camel, as we remember the wise men in the Bible when Jesus was born coming on camels. So King Ahab, which was a wicked king, had died. And it now had become time for Elisha to be taken up to heaven. His ministry was over. And so he was in the town of Gilgal, and he was on his way to Bethel. So he turned to his mentor, assistant, who had been mentoring Elisha, and told him, he said, "You may stay here, because I have a long way to travel and I have a lot of walking to do today." And Elisha looked at him and said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." Elisha wanted to stay with his mentor Elijah and to follow on with him. And so they traveled and they arrived at Bethel. And when they were at Bethel, some other prophets came up to Elisha and said, "Do you not realize, do you not know that Elijah is going to be taken up into heaven today and he's going to leave you?" And Elisha looked at them and said, "Be quiet, leave me alone. I must stay focused. I must follow him today. He has a great task still before him." So they left Bethel and then they went to Jericho. And at Jericho, another group of prophets came up to them and said, "Do you not know that Elijah is going to be taken today and he's going to leave you?" And Elisha once again told them, "Be quiet. Do not distract me. I need to keep my focus on Elijah." And then Elisha came to Elisha and said, "I have walked many distances already from Gilgal to Bethel, and now I'm to Jericho. You don't need to follow me anymore." And once again, Elisha looked at Elijah and said to him, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." He knew that he needed to stay with Elisha that day. He did not need to leave him. And so they headed out from Jericho to the Jordan River. And when they got to the Jordan River, they had no way to cross the river. They did not have a boat. There was not a bridge. And so what did Elisha do? He took off his cloak. And this was the cloak he may have taken off. And he took it off and he rolled it up very carefully. He rolled up his cloak and he threw it onto the water. And the water of the Jordan River, it parted and became dry ground, and they were able to walk across. And when they got to the other side, Elijah looked back at Elisha and said, "You have followed me these great distance today. You've walked a long way with me. I'm getting ready to leave you. What would you like me to give you? Would you like me to give you some of my belongings? What would you like from me? What can I do to bless you?" And so Elisha looked at Elijah and said, "I want a double portion of your ministry. I want to be the godly prophet that you have been. I want to have even a greater ministry than you have. And Elijah looked at Elisha and said, you have asked a very hard thing, and I will be able to give that to you. But there is one thing you must do. You must watch me when I'm taken away from this earth. You must keep your eyes upon me and not lose me and not be departed from me. And Elijah said, I will try to do that. And so right about that time, a great whirlwind came, like a mini tornado, and dust and dirt was strewn up. And all of a sudden, out of heaven, there were chariots of fire and horses and chariots of fire raced down from heaven, and they separated the two men. And so Elijah was getting ready to be taken up in this chariot of fire, and Elijah worked to keep his eyes upon Elijah so he did not lose and see him. But he saw him as he was taken up, and so he was going to be able to be given the double portion. But he did not know at that time, but he cried out as Elijah was taken up into heaven, my Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. Then Elisha disappeared from sight. Now Elisha reached over and picked up the cloak that Elijah had thrown on the water, and he went back to the Jordan River, and he threw it down upon the water. And just as it happened for Elisha, the waters parted, and he was able to walk across on dry ground. When he got to the prophets on the other side, they looked at Elisha and they said, the spirit of Elijah is upon you. You were able to do the same miracle of parting the Jordan River that Elijah was able to do. So they also then left because they wanted to find out if in the chariot and the horses of fire, if possibly Elijah had been put down somewhere, but he hadn't been. Did you know in the Bible, prophets were men that spoke the word of God? But we're going to know a little bit more about, as we study the Bible, about how Jesus came. He did not just speak the words that God gave to him, but he spoke the words of God because Jesus was God. There was also a verse that was in Malachi that said, remember the law of my servant Moses, the statutes and rules that I commanded him at Horeb before all Israel. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And that prophecy was fulfilled when John the Baptist was come, because he proclaimed the great and marvelous day of the Lord. He proclaimed that Jesus was coming and he was the Messiah. And so that is the one story today that we're going to talk about how Elisha has gone up into heaven. And our next story is about how Elijah became a prophet with great and mighty works.